So a couple of months back, EA announced the long-awaited return of their college football series, almost a decade after they released the last game. This was met with a ton of fanfare and shock. Fanfare because a lot of people love the series. Not me personally, I always felt a little guilty because the players never really got any money from it. It was also met with a ton of shock because, as popular as the series was, it was canceled due to some pretty tough circumstances. Specifically, a huge lawsuit from a number of former players claiming that the game was using their likeness, which ended up killing the franchise. And although the games didn't use their names, they did use the same jersey numbers, heights, weights, skin tones, hair colors, home states, pretty much everything else about them, without their permission and without any compensation. And to be honest, the way they copied the players' likeness was pretty blatant. Like they kind of stuck their necks out here. Look at this Alabama team from NCAA 14, which was the last game they released. QB number 10 closely resembles then quarterback AJ McCarron, who also wore number 10. Throwing to number 4, also worn by TJ Yeldon, their running back that year. Next play down is thrown to tight end number 84, who again closely resembles another player from that team, tight end Brian Vogler, who also wore number 84. They had everything but the player names in the game, and those were pretty easy to download online. So yeah, it was kind of messed up how they were never compensated for it. And that was a lot of what was behind the lawsuit and the eventual decision to put the series on hold. But since 2013, a lot has changed in the narrative regarding compensation for college athletes, and lawmakers have started to push for new bills allowing for college athletes to start getting some form of compensation. Mind you, these are the same lawmakers who before were adamant that college athletes should be treated as nothing more than amateurs and shouldn't be allowed any money, the only benefit being a scholarship so they can get a degree in geology. And that's not supposed to be a knock on college athletes. I don't think they're dumb in the slightest. Alright, there's a couple of y'all, but for the most part, I don't think y'all are dumb in the slightest. But again, these are professional athletes who spend the bulk of their day training, practicing, and watching film. Scholarship or not, I don't think it's fair to expect them to have time to chase a degree in something like computer science when education is not their priority, which really puts into question the true value of the education and scholarship that they're getting, which is being bolstered as the reason why they shouldn't get paid because they're already getting a free education. One of my close friends was a college athlete. He actually played football at the University of Washington, and he was telling me a story about during his orientation, one of his coaches coming up to him and saying, "School comes first," and just stared at him and just gave him a really awkward smile. Maybe that was just how he was looking at me when he was telling the story. It was a little weird. I think he liked me. Y'all think he liked me? I think he liked me. But fast forward to a little over a year ago to the first sign of optimism regarding the game's return, when NCAA President Mark Emmert outlined 3 things that would need to happen in order for the game to be brought back. And buddy, when I tell you this is the scummiest list of all time, check this out. The first thing that would need to happen for the game to return, according to Mark Emmert, and I quote, "The NCAA would need assurances it would not be sued." So off the bat, you already know fucking these athletes over, because who in their right minds says some shit like that? What? Criminals ask to not get sued for their actions. Like imagine if you could get some reassurances like that before you went and robbed the bank. Like, hey, yo, I'm about to hit a lick on this Wells Fargo. Don't worry, they gave me reassurances they're not gonna sue me. It sounds ridiculous, and rightfully so, because it is. Alright, the second requirement he mentioned for the game to return would be a system allowing for athletes to be paid for being used in the game. Alright, dope, sweet. So everybody's getting paid. That's dope. Alright, I'm glad we're aligned here. Hold on. Let's get to his third requirement, which is that the NCAA would need to be sure that unions would not be formed. Mark, my man, Marky. Baby, come on, son. These last 2 points are extremely contradictory. Part of the way athletes can ensure that they're paid fairly are through unions. They're one of the last remaining examples of actually effective unions, at least in the United States. And is a lot of the reason athletes in other leagues like the NBA or the NFL are so well compensated. Because the players' unions negotiate these contracts with entities like game developers on behalf of the players. It's a separate organization that's single objective, single role, single incentive is to represent the athletes to the best of their abilities and get them the best deal possible. So when 2K recently re-upped their rights deals with the NBA for the next 7 years, they paid a total of $1.1 billion, half of which went to the players because of the representation the NBA Players Union provides. If there were no players union, there would be no entity to represent the players in negotiations like this, leading to a model where the only seat at the table are the heads of these organizations, kind of like college, who otherwise have no incentive to pay the athletes, kind of like college, who can pick and choose if and how much these athletes get paid, Again, kind of like college. For as much criticism as I want to give players unions, and trust me, there's a lot that they can do to improve, but that's another story for another day. I have a whole other video planned on that. If it wasn't for the players unions, it's likely that these athletes would be wildly underpaid. And the worst part is, though, that college and the NCAA take it a step further and state that not only can they not get compensated by the institutions, but that they don't even have the rights to make money off their own likeness. It's sick, it really is. Like, it's one thing if UCLA doesn't pay me a dime, it sucks. But what does it have to do with me getting sponsorship for promoting some flat tummy tea on my Instagram? Shoot, I always felt like this was an unnecessary rule. That was more the NCAA just over-asserting itself as a single entity that represents all things college sports, financially or otherwise. They really just run a monopoly. And while the NCAA has continued to have no issues enforcing its no pay for play rule, it's losing ground on the restrictions regarding athletes getting paid for their name, image, and likeness, or NIL. Florida, of all places, a place well known for its sane and progressive people, was the first state to enact a law allowing athletes at schools in the state to receive compensation for commercial use of their name, image, and likeness rights. And there weren't a ton of restrictions to go alongside that. The main thing they asked was that athletes would respect the existing agreements that their institutions have. So if they're attending a Nike-sponsored school, they wouldn't be able to become an Adidas-sponsored athlete. Again, Florida. This is happening in Florida. Now, to be fair, 2 other states, California and Colorado, did also pass similar laws before Florida, but those don't go into effect until 2023, which is probably going to be deemed useless since federal law is likely to be put in place by then. Now, in terms of the specifics of the federal law, let's dig into that. There are 3 bills, I just held up 6. There are 3 bills floating across Congress right now, each with varying degrees of protections for either players or the NCAA. The bill that's the most conservative, meaning it has the most protections for the NCAA, was drafted by Senator John Wicker from Mississippi. MISSI, SSI, PBI. I got that, boy. Come on, son. Senator Wicker's bill has 2 big protections. First, the proposed bill will block all compensation opportunities until a college athlete has completed at least 12% of his or her credits required for graduation. So that could mean no sponsorships or endorsements until the athlete's 2nd semester of their freshman year. What's the point of that? I don't really know. It feels like an unnecessary hurdle, but okay. I guess just take fillers for a semester. Like, yo, I took a class on the history of coffee once. I actually liked it. I don't remember shit, but the professors were cool. Anyway, okay, sorry. Wicker's bill also provides the NCAA with an antitrust exemption, meaning they don't run the risk of being broken up for having a monopoly over college athletics. This would also protect schools if athletes wanted to sue their institution for making a rule change that unfairly impedes their right to make money. Now, my issue with Senator Wicker's bill is that it's not really fair to say that you're making a bill in support of athletes, but effectively removing any way for them to fight or voice their concerns with the rules set in place. Really, they're treating them like kids, which they're not. They really said, like, yo, you get what you get and you don't make it fit, which was totally fine when I was in line to get fish sticks in kindergarten. Yo, fish sticks, bro. Fish sticks. We need to bring those back. I know they haven't gone anywhere, but I need to bring those back, like specifically back into my diet. I miss fish sticks, dog. I saw something the other day. This dude took fish sticks and put them on top of a fried chicken sandwich and then just drizzled it in marinara sauce. It looked disgusting, but I want to try it. He called it land and sea because chickens are on the land, but fish in the water. I'm probably going to edit that out. The second bill floating around Congress was drafted by New Jersey Senator Cory Booker, which is way over on the opposite side of the spectrum compared to Senator Wicker's. Booker's bill takes a very pro-athlete approach, taking aim not only at NIL restrictions, name, image, and likeness restrictions, but also at the lack of ongoing medical coverage for former athletes. His bill also includes group licensing and proposed revenue sharing for athletes, which are 2 things the NCAA absolutely does not want to happen, because God forbid they break the athletes off some change and pay some medical bills for their injuries. It would be a real shame, a real shame. Booker states that part of the motivation for including all this in his legislation, whereas the other bills are just focused on the NIL restrictions, was the lavish spending throughout college sports and the fact that the head coaches were often the highest paid employees in many states. He says that it's not that complex to come up with a system that takes a very small percentage of the billions of revenue brought in each year across college sports, roughly 8 to 12%, to create a revenue sharing model for the revenue generating sports. His bill essentially would have schools split revenue 50-50 after accounting for the cost of scholarships. Of all the proposals, this is the one I rock with the most. It's exactly what should have been in place a long time ago. And that's exactly why it will never happen. No way in hell these schools go from collecting 100% of their revenue to half of that. They'd rather spend more money on building fancy dorms and incurring more debt to make it seem like their programs aren't that profitable. That's a real thing. Google it. And while I don't think Senator Booker's proposal will ever go through, my mother always had this quote that stuck with me, which was, if you need a nickel, ask for a dime, not a penny. My mom didn't say that shit. I heard that in the rap song. But nevertheless, it applies. We know they won't ever get everything Senator Booker is demanding, but maybe you get a fraction of it. And in negotiations, once you can turn a hard no into a soft yes, you can start working your way into getting what you really want. Maybe it'll take a few years, but who thought we'd ever get this far with the NCAA? Even if it did take a century. The last bill was drafted by Representative Gonzalez, which falls somewhere in the middle between Senator Wicker's pro-NCAA approach and Senator Booker's pro-athlete approach. Gonzalez's bill is actually the only one to get legitimate backing from both Democrats and Republicans, and is seen as somewhat of a compromise. The Gonzalez bill offers schools one thing they really want, an assurance that athletes won't be considered employees, but doesn't offer schools any sort of antitrust protection. This is an important point for athletes who would like to retain the right to sue if the school makes a rule change that unfairly impedes their right to make money, going against what Senator Wicker had proposed. The biggest drawback, however, is that Gonzalez's bill doesn't pave the way for group licensing, which would allow for all NCAA athletes in bulk to provide their rights to their name, image, and likeness the same way the players do in other leagues. This is something Senator Booker does have in his bill, and without it would make it a lot harder for EA Sports to start producing games again. But okay, that's the big question here. How does all this affect the game? So the first thing you'll notice is the title of the game. It's no longer going to be called the NCAA football. It's going to be called EA Sports College Football, at least for now. The NCAA hasn't provided their license to EA. Instead, EA has gone ahead and kind of taken a backdoor approach by getting licenses directly from the schools via a proxy in a company called the Collegiate Licensing Company, who can provide the rights to the university names and teams and logos, not requiring EA to work directly with the NCAA to develop a college football game. It's weird, I know. Now, what does this mean for players and player likenesses appearing in the game, since that's what got them caught up in the first place, and put the series on hold for as long as it did? Will we get a version of the game with full rosters, including player names, face scans, all that good stuff? Potentially, but not until Congress decides and passes one of the 3+ bills we reviewed earlier. Until then, expect EA to take a very conservative approach, putting extremely generic players in place of the real ones. They still might play the same, but you'll have dudes that are supposed to look like Mike Vick actually look like white Mike Vick. That's still the wildest meme I've ever seen. But it's very possible that soon EA will actually have a fully licensed college football product, one that actually pays players to be in the game. Because if it's in the game, it's in the game. Alright, so we chatted about what the future of college athletics might look like, specifically regarding compensation for the athletes, and what effects this might have for the future of college football video games. The future. Why did I say it like that? Now it's time for our favorite part of the program, predictions. Alright. EA's deal, or lack thereof, with the NCAA creates an interesting predicament for the company, that they don't have an opportunity to generate an exclusivity deal with the organization like they do the NFL and Madden, which opens up the door to a potential competitor stepping into this lucrative market. Keep in mind, to date, the NCAA football franchise is the 4th highest grossing sports franchise of all time. I know I just hit my mic, but I'm going to keep going. I'm not re-recording this. And they haven't released a game in 8 years. 8 years, and they're still the 4th highest grossing sports franchise of all time. So there's a huge incentive for other entrants into this market. Now, let's say there was a company that used to make great football video games, but lost the rights to make the games after a certain someone, EA, snagged an exclusive rights deal with the NFL. Now let's say that certain someone wanted to get back into the sport and has already begun making inroads with the NFL to produce a non-simulation football game. In the interest of re-entering the sport, they begin working on their own NCAA football game. which can be easily ported over into a comparable NFL game. Really, it's just different logos, stadiums, maybe a couple of additional features. All they need is the green light from the league in their next negotiations with EA to open the door to there being another potential competitor, and boom, you now have 2 college and pro football games on the shelves. Now, do I think this is gonna happen? Yeah. But I also didn't think a college football game was ever coming back, so who knows? I also didn't think I'd ever spend my money on a college football game either. But hey, if the athletes are getting paid, then I just might have to. Cause man, those games were fun. I'm not gonna lie. Those games were fun. Those games were fun. I can't even speak. All right, y'all. Thank y'all for making it through another video. I appreciate it. If you haven't already, please hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. I'm just starting out here, and any sort of support that I can get is greatly appreciated. I also want to give a huge thank you to everyone that's been super supportive as of late. Yeah, I know it ain't much. Might not look like much. What am I at now? Like 29 subscribers. I know it's not a ton, but I really didn't think anybody would care to watch. So the fact that 29 of y'all cared enough to hit that little subscribe button at the end, that really means the world to me. Like anytime I see that number go up, I get like a little flutter in my belly, my little belly area, my flat tummy tea area. And that's about it, y'all. Love y'all. Have a great rest of your day. Peace. Those games was fun. I can't even lie. I can't even cap. No, they were fun. They were fun. Whole lot of fun. Whole lot of gang shit.